The call from my mother came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was preparing for another sales trip to Chicago. At 50, I'd risen to become a regional sales director at my medical supply company, a position that kept me traveling but also afforded me the independence I'd always craved. I recognized Margaret's number on my phone and felt that familiar tightening in my chest. My finger hovered over the decline button, but something, that lifelong sense of obligation perhaps, made me answer. Evelyn, honey, how are you? Mom's voice had that saccharine tone she always used when she wanted something. I'd recognized it since childhood, that slight lift at the end of her sentences that signaled a request was coming. I'm fine, Mom. Just getting ready for a trip to Chicago tomorrow. What's up? I tucked the phone between my ear and shoulder as I continued folding my tailored business suits into my suitcase, already knowing this conversation wouldn't be quick or painless. Well, I have some news. Your sister is back in town. She and Greg moved back from Arizona yesterday. I paused, my hand frozen mid-fold over a silk blouse. Natalie and I hadn't spoken much since Grandma Louise's will reading 4 years ago. The silence between us wasn't accidental. Oh, I thought her husband's business was doing so well out there. She was always posting those success stories on Instagram during the holidays. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice, remembering the photos of their supposed luxury lifestyle while I worked 60-hour weeks. Mom's voice dropped slightly. Well, things didn't quite work out. Apparently, there were some issues with their business partners, and they decided it would be best to come home and start fresh. I see. 20 years of experience with my sister's patterns told me exactly where this conversation was headed. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, preparing myself. The thing is, honey, Margaret continued, her voice taking on that pleading quality that had worked on me since childhood. They're staying with us right now, but you know how small our place is. Richard's knees are getting worse, and having them in the guest room means he has nowhere to do his physical therapy exercises. I counted to 5 in my head, a technique my therapist had suggested years ago. It rarely worked, but I tried anyway. Mom, are you asking what I think you're asking? Well, that house your grandmother left you has 3 bedrooms, and you're all alone in that big place. It would just be temporary until they find jobs and get back on their feet. Grandma Louise's house. My sanctuary. The one place that was truly mine after a childhood spent feeling like a guest in my own home. After Dad died when I was 5, Mom married Richard just 18 months later. Then came Natalie, and suddenly I was an afterthought, useful only when there were responsibilities to shoulder. How temporary is temporary? I asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be honest. Oh, not long at all. A month or two tops. Greg already has some promising interviews lined up. I doubted that, but what could I say? The guilt was already creeping in, that familiar feeling that had been my companion since childhood. The voice that whispered I was selfish for wanting my own space, for not immediately offering help. Fine, they can stay in the blue bedroom, but only until they find their own place. I mean it, Mom. 2 months maximum. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of my bed and let memories wash over me. My chest felt heavy, like someone had placed a weight on it. At 50, I should have been able to say no, to set boundaries. Yet here I was again, giving in. Natalie was 6 years younger than me, Richard's biological daughter. From the moment she was born, she became the center of our family's universe. While Mom and Richard doted on her, I found refuge at Grandma Louise's house. Dad's mother never tried to replace my parents, but she gave me something they couldn't: undivided attention. Weekends at her house became my escape from Natalie's chaos at home. She'd enter my room without knocking, borrow my things without asking, and throw tantrums when told no. Mom and Richard always defended her. She's just a child, Evelyn. Don't be so uptight. College had been my first real taste of freedom. Living in the dorms, I could finally have my own space that no one invaded. Then, during my senior year, Grandma Louise passed away. I was devastated, but amid my grief came an unexpected gift. She left me her house and savings. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to help me start my life debt-free. Natalie's reaction was swift and entitled. This isn't fair. We should sell it and split the money. She wasn't your grandmother, I'd replied, standing my ground for once. She was my dad's mother, not related to you at all. But we're still family. Mom, tell her. And true to form, Mom and Richard had gently suggested I consider sharing with my sister. I refused, and our already strained relationship fractured further. We barely spoke after that, except for obligatory family gatherings. I attended her wedding when she was 26, watching her marry Greg, a man 3 years her senior with family money and business connections. They moved to Arizona shortly after, and I was secretly relieved to have her even further from my life. Now, 4 years later, they were back, and soon they'd be in my house. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache starting to form. My job as a sales director for a medical supply company kept me traveling regularly, something I usually enjoyed. Now, those business trips would serve a different purpose, escapes from whatever chaos Natalie would inevitably bring into my home. A week later, they arrived with 6 suitcases of designer clothes and accessories. At 44, Natalie still had the same self-centered approach to life she'd had at 14. She hugged me with artificial enthusiasm, her expensive perfume nearly choking me, while Greg shook my hand firmly, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Eve. It's been forever. Natalie gushed, using the nickname I'd always disliked. The house looks exactly the same. Don't you ever redecorate? I bit back a sharp response. I like it this way. It reminds me of Grandma. I showed them to the blue bedroom and helped them unpack. As I hung up Natalie's third designer coat, I couldn't help thinking that selling just one of these items could probably cover a month's rent somewhere decent. At dinner that night, Greg cleared his throat. I've got some promising leads already. I'm meeting with an old college friend tomorrow who works in investment banking. That's great, I said, genuinely hoping he'd find something quickly. 50 years of experience had taught me hope and reality rarely aligned when it came to my family, but I could still try. Natalie twirled her fork in her pasta, which I'd spent an hour preparing after a full day at work. I won't be looking for work right away. I'm more of a homemaker, you know. I love taking care of the house and making things nice. I raised my eyebrows, unable to stop myself. Well, that's perfect then. Since you enjoy household chores, you can handle the cleaning, cooking, and laundry while you're here. Her face fell instantly. Oh no, that's not what I meant. I like doing that in my own home. I'm a guest here. So you're a homemaker, but only when it's convenient? The words came out before I could stop them, decades of resentment bubbling to the surface. Don't twist my words, she snapped, her carefully maintained facade cracking slightly. I just meant I'm still settling in. Greg jumped in to change the subject, and I let it drop. But I already knew how this arrangement would play out. Some things never change, especially people who've never had to. 2 weeks later, 2 weeks into living with Natalie and Greg, I'd established a routine. Wake up early, leave for work before they got up, and return home as late as possible. It wasn't ideal, but it helped me minimize my time around Natalie, who had already fallen into her old habits. Despite her claims of being a homemaker, I'd come home each evening to find dishes in the sink, clothes strewn across the living room, and no sign of dinner. Meanwhile, Natalie would be sprawled on my couch, scrolling through her phone or watching reality TV. Oh, you're back, she'd say without looking up. Can you make something to eat? I'm starving. The first few times I'd bite my tongue and make dinner for all of us. By the second week, my patience was wearing thin. I felt like I was 30 years younger, the responsible teenager expected to care for her spoiled sister. Natalie, what did you do today? I asked one evening after finding the house in disarray again. My feet ached from standing in presentations all day, and all I'd wanted was to come home to a peaceful house. She shrugged, not bothering to look up from her phone. Went to see Mom and Dad, then met up with Jessica from high school. Did you know she has 2 kids now? Her life is so boring. Did you have time to maybe run the vacuum or start a load of laundry? I tried to keep my voice even, though I could feel my blood pressure rising. God, Eve, you're so uptight. I've been busy reconnecting with people. Besides, it's your house. Shouldn't you want to keep it nice? She finally looked up, her expression suggesting I was being unreasonable. I had to walk away before saying something I'd regret. At 50, I should have outgrown this dynamic, yet here we were, stuck in the same patterns from decades ago. Greg, at least, seemed to be making an effort. He left every morning in a suit, returning in the evenings with stories about interviews and networking events. Whether he was actually job hunting or just avoiding the house, I couldn't tell, but at least he wasn't adding to my stress. When my boss called with news of a week-long business trip to Boston, I nearly hugged him through the phone. 7 whole days away from this situation sounded like paradise. The night before my departure, I made my expectations clear to Natalie. I'll be gone for a week, I said as I packed my suitcase. I don't want any parties in my house while I'm away, no guests staying over, no messes that'll be waiting for me when I get back. Natalie dramatically rolled her eyes. Yes, Mom, anything else? No breathing your precious air, no sitting on your sacred furniture? I paused, trying to gauge if she was joking or being deliberately hostile. Her expression gave nothing away. Before I could respond, Greg entered the room. Don't worry, Eve. I've got a second interview next week, so hopefully we'll be out of your hair soon anyway. I left early the next morning, trying to ignore the nagging feeling that something would go wrong in my absence. 20 years in sales had taught me to trust my instincts, and right now, they were screaming. A week later, the Boston trip turned out to be a blessing. Not only did I get a break from the tension at home, but I closed a deal with a major hospital chain that would earn me a substantial bonus. My boss was thrilled, promising a nice percentage on top of my regular commission. Great work, Evelyn, he said during our final call. Take an extra day if you need it. You've earned it. I declined the extra day, booking the earliest flight home instead. Despite my concerns, part of me hoped that Natalie and Greg had respected my wishes. Maybe I'd return to find the house in order and good news about Greg's job prospects. The rational part of me knew better, but hope dies hard, especially when it comes to family. My flight landed late Sunday afternoon. The house looked normal from the outside as my taxi pulled up, which I took as a good sign. I unlocked the front door, wheeling my suitcase into the foyer when I noticed something odd. There were 3 unfamiliar suitcases stacked by the stairs. Before I could process what this meant, I heard laughter coming from the living room. Not just Natalie and Greg's voices, but others I vaguely recognized. My stomach dropped. I dropped my bags and marched toward the sound, every muscle in my body tensing. The scene that greeted me stopped me in my tracks. Natalie and Greg sat on my couch, coffee cups in hand, across from an older couple I recognized as Greg's parents. All 4 looked up in surprise as I appeared in the doorway. Evelyn. Natalie's voice was unnaturally high. We weren't expecting you until later tonight. Clearly, I replied coldly, looking pointedly at the extra luggage in my hallway. What's going on here? Natalie plastered on a smile. Oh, you remember Greg's parents, Howard and Patricia. They decided to come visit us for a little while. Isn't that nice? I opened my mouth to object, to remind everyone that this was my house and I hadn't authorized any guests, when Natalie jumped up, grabbed my arm, and practically dragged me into the kitchen. Just give us a minute, she called over her shoulder before closing the kitchen door behind us. Have you lost your mind? I hissed, jerking my arm away from her grip. I specifically said, no guests, I know, she whispered, her eyes pleading. But I need you to play along, just for a little while. 2 weeks, tops. 2 weeks? Absolutely not. I want them gone tomorrow. My voice rose despite my efforts to keep it down. Please? Evelyn. Her voice dropped even lower. I told them this house belongs to me. Greg played along. They've been treating me so much better since they think I have this nice place. After the business failed, they've been so cold to me, blaming me for distracting Greg or whatever. This is helping us save face. My jaw literally dropped. At 50, I thought I'd seen every manipulative tactic my sister could devise. I was wrong. You're out of your mind. I'm not playing along with this insanity. Please, she grabbed my hands. I'll do all the housework. I swear. I'll cook, clean, do laundry, everything I haven't been doing. Just pretend you're staying with me for a while because you're having work troubles. Please, Evelyn. I've never asked you for anything. I looked at her desperate face and felt myself wavering. It was ridiculous, completely insane, but somehow I found myself nodding. The same pattern I'd followed since childhood, seeing her desperate, knowing she was wrong, and giving in anyway. 2 weeks, not a day longer, and you'd better keep your promise about the housework. Relief flooded her features. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I swear you won't regret it. We returned to the living room, where I was introduced as Natalie's sister who was temporarily staying with her due to some work issues. Patricia nodded sympathetically, though her eyes held a hint of judgment. Howard shook my hand firmly, his gaze evaluating me like I was a business proposal he wasn't impressed by. Dinner that evening was takeout from the restaurant across the street, though Natalie claimed she'd made everything herself. Howard and Patricia dominated the conversation, explaining how their son's business had failed due to unscrupulous partners and cutthroat competitors, never once suggesting that Greg might bear any responsibility. As the meal ended, Natalie turned to me with a sweet smile that immediately set off alarm bells. Evelyn, would you mind handling the dishes while I chat with Howard and Patricia? Thanks, sis. And just like that, I knew I'd been played. As I scraped plates at the sink, watching Natalie laugh and charm her in-laws in my living room, I had the sinking feeling that her promises about housework would never materialize. At 50, I should have known better, yet the same patterns kept repeating, like a record stuck in a groove. 1 week later, my prediction about Natalie's broken promises proved spot on. A week into this bizarre charade, and I'd become the unofficial maid, cook, and punching bag for the entire household. Every morning, I'd leave for work while everyone else slept in. Greg had completely abandoned his job search, instead playing tour guide to his parents around town. They'd spend their days shopping, sightseeing, and dining out, all while I worked to pay the house bills they believed belonged to my sister. When I'd return each evening, Natalie would make a show of cooking dinner for her in-laws, which meant ordering takeout, transferring it to my grandmother's serving dishes, and then parading it out as her own creation. She'd even mess up the kitchen to make it look like she'd been cooking all day. Evelyn, could you help clean up the kitchen? Became her nightly refrain, always delivered with Patricia and Howard watching. Since you're staying with us, it's only fair you contribute. The irony of these words in my own home stung each time. I'd bite my tongue and do as asked, feeling Patricia's judgmental stare boring into my back. She'd taken to making little comments within my earshot. It's so generous of Natalie to help her sister during hard times. Family should always come first, or I raised Greg to be successful, but also to help those less fortunate. I'm glad he's supporting both his wife and her struggling sister. Each comment made my blood boil, but I'd smile tightly and continue whatever chore I was doing. The theater of it all was exhausting. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the window as I washed dishes and hardly recognize myself, a 50-year-old woman, successful in her career, reduced to playing a subservient role in her own home. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day at work presenting to skeptical hospital administrators, I cornered Natalie in the laundry room. This has to stop, I said, my voice low but firm. You promised you'd do the housework, but I'm doing everything while you play hostess in my house. She had the decency to look guilty, at least. I know, I'm sorry. It's just that Patricia has such high expectations, and I don't want to disappoint her. When are they leaving? It's been over a week. They need to go. I'll talk to Greg, she promised. But I could tell from her expression that nothing would change. I was trapped in a situation of my own making, a result of a lifetime of giving in. That night, I received the monthly utility bills and nearly collapsed. The cost had more than doubled with 5 people in the house. Extra water usage, electricity running all day, heating kept at tropical levels because Patricia was sensitive to cold. It all added up to hundreds of dollars more than my usual bills. I stormed downstairs, bills in hand, finding Natalie alone in the kitchen. Look at this. I thrust the papers at her. The utilities have doubled. You need to pay at least half. Natalie scanned the bills, her eyes widening. I can't afford this. We don't have any money right now. That's not my problem. You're all living here, using water and electricity all day while I'm at work. I'm not covering this alone. Don't be like that, Natalie whined, reverting to the tone she'd used as a teenager. We're family, can't you help us out just this once? My patience finally snapped. 50 years of accommodating others, of putting my needs last, of being the responsible one while others took advantage, all came crashing down. No, I'm tired of this whole situation. If you can't contribute financially, then you need to at least do what you promised and take care of the house. But you haven't done that either. I'm sick of being taken advantage of. I hadn't realized how loud I'd gotten until I heard the front door open. Greg and his parents returned from their latest outing, catching the tail end of our argument. My cheeks burned with embarrassment, but also with the heat of long suppressed anger. What's going on here? Howard demanded, his eyebrows furrowed in disapproval. Natalie's expression morphed instantly from petulant to victimized. Evelyn doesn't want to pay her share of the bills, she said, her voice small and hurt. I stared at her in disbelief. After everything, she was still throwing me under the bus. Patricia stepped forward, her face stern. Young lady, I don't understand your attitude. Your sister has generously opened her home to you during your difficulties. And this is how you repay her? By refusing to contribute? That's not what I started, but Howard cut me off. Frankly, we've noticed your lack of gratitude since we arrived. Natalie cooks and maintains this beautiful home while you just come and go as you please, taking advantage of her goodness. My head was spinning. The sheer absurdity of being lectured about taking advantage of Natalie in my own house was too much. Without another word, I grabbed the bills and retreated to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. I could hear them downstairs, their muffled voices rising and falling. I imagined Natalie playing the victim, her in-laws comforting her, all at my expense. The injustice of it burned in my chest. Here I was, 50 years old, successful in my career, yet still trapped in the same family dynamics that had defined my childhood. When hunger finally drove me downstairs for dinner, the atmosphere was frigid. Patricia and Howard barely acknowledged my presence, while Natalie avoided meeting my eyes. Only Greg seemed uncomfortable with the tension, fidgeting with his napkin and attempting small talk that quickly died. Then Patricia cleared her throat. Natalie dear, my father always taught me that honesty and respect are the foundations of any household. Of course, Mom, Natalie replied, suddenly attentive. Which is why we feel we must speak up. Patricia shot a pointed look in my direction. We don't think it's working out having your sister here. She's clearly taking advantage of your hospitality, and frankly, her attitude is affecting the peace of your lovely home. I nearly choked on my water. This was surreal, like being in a twisted alternate reality where everything was backward. Howard nodded in agreement. You've been more than generous, but there comes a point where you have to put your own family first. Greg agrees, don't you, son? Patricia pressed. Greg mumbled something unintelligible, studying his plate intently, his discomfort palpable. Patricia continued, her voice firm with conviction. We think it would be best if Evelyn found other living arrangements soon. All eyes turned to Natalie, waiting for her response. I watched her curiously, wondering if she'd finally come clean about whose house this actually was. She hesitated, her eyes darting between her in-laws and me. I could see the internal struggle playing out on her face. Then, with a deep breath, she turned to me. Evelyn, she said, her voice unnaturally firm. I think it would be best if you packed your things. I need you to move out in 2 weeks. The silence that followed was deafening. Howard and Patricia nodded approvingly, while Greg stared at his wife in shock. Natalie's eyes met mine, pleading silently for me to play along one more time. But something in me had finally snapped. I'd reached my breaking point, not with a bang, but with a quiet, profound clarity. I was done being the family doormat. Done sacrificing my peace for people who never appreciated it. Done living by rules that only seemed to apply to me. I slowly stood up, placed my napkin on the table, and looked around at the people who had invaded my life and my home. For the first time, I saw them clearly, not as family I was obligated to appease, but as adults making choices that disrespected me. No, I said quietly. I don't think I will. The room fell silent after my refusal. Patricia's mouth hung open in shock, while Howard's face reddened with indignation. Excuse me, Patricia finally sputtered. This isn't your decision to make, young lady. I felt a strange calm spreading through me, replacing the anger and frustration. At 50, I was finally ready to stand my ground. not with rage but with dignity. I leaned forward, placing my palms flat on the dining table, my grandmother's table in my house. Actually, it is. Everyone in this room has exactly 2 days to pack their things and leave. And I mean everyone. Natalie's face drained of color. Evelyn, please, can we talk about this in private? No more private talks, Natalie. I'm done with the lies and manipulation. I turned to Patricia and Howard. There's something you should know. I've let Natalie and Greg stay here temporarily because they needed help. But this is my house. I own it. I pay the bills. Patricia's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Natalie, is this true? Natalie looked like she might throw up. I can explain. You told us this was your house. Howard's voice had turned dangerously quiet. You showed us around like you owned the place. Greg finally spoke up. Dad, we were just trying to save face. After the business failed, we didn't want you to know how bad things had gotten. The next few minutes were chaos. Howard and Patricia shouted at Greg and Natalie. Natalie cried and tried to defend herself. Greg sat with his head in his hands, looking defeated. I stood watching the fallout of my sister's lies crumbling around her. Finally, I'd had enough. Quiet. I slammed my hand on the table hard enough to make the dishes rattle. I don't care about your family drama. I want all of you out of my house now. Patricia stood up with as much dignity as she could muster. We'll be leaving immediately. We wouldn't stay another minute in a house built on lies. She glared at her son and daughter-in-law. And you two don't expect to come running to us after this humiliation. Within an hour, Patricia and Howard had packed their bags and called a taxi. They left without saying goodbye to anyone, the door slamming behind them with finality. As soon as they were gone, Natalie exploded. How could you do this to me? You've ruined everything. They'll never forgive us now. Me? You lied to them, Natalie. You lied to me. You've been taking advantage of me since the day you moved in. I was desperate. Their approval means everything to Greg's future. Now we have nothing. That's not my problem, I said calmly, feeling lighter than I had in years. You have 2 days to find somewhere else to live. Natalie's face contorted with rage. You've always been jealous of me, always. Just because Grandma Louise left you this house. She left me this house because she was my grandmother, not yours, and because I was the only one who spent time with her, who cared about her. You only showed interest in what you could get from her. That's not true. It is true. Just like it's true that you haven't changed a bit since we were kids. You still think the world revolves around you, that rules don't apply to you, that everyone should bend over backward to accommodate you. Well, I'm done accommodating you, Natalie. Get out of my house. I turned and walked upstairs, locking myself in my bedroom to the sound of Natalie's continued shouting. I was shaking with adrenaline, but also felt strangely calm. For the first time in my life, I'd stood up to my sister without backing down. It felt like stepping out of a role I'd been playing for 50 years into something new, something more authentic. The next morning, early the next morning, my phone rang. It was my mother. I almost didn't answer, but 50 years of conditioning is hard to break in a single night. Evelyn, what in the world is going on? Natalie called me last night, hysterical, saying you've thrown her and Greg out. They have nowhere to go. They can stay with you and Richard. Your house isn't that small. The words came out before I could stop them, but I didn't regret them. That's not the point. Family helps family, you know that. I laughed bitterly. Does that rule apply to Natalie too? Because she hasn't done a thing to help me since she moved in. Instead, she lied to her in-laws, claiming my house was hers, and then tried to kick me out when they suggested it. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. Margaret's voice had that familiar tone, the one that had always preceded her taking Natalie's side. No misunderstanding, Mom. For once, I didn't let her interrupt or redirect. She and Greg moved in, promised it would be temporary, then invited his parents without asking me. She left all the housework to me while pretending to her in-laws that she was the lady of the house. When I asked them to contribute to the doubled utility bills, she refused and then blamed me in front of everyone. My mother was silent for a moment, which was unusual. Then, well, I'm sure she didn't mean. I don't care what she meant. I've been more than generous, and she's taken advantage at every turn. They need to leave today. Evelyn, please reconsider. No. And honestly, Mom, I don't want to hear from you or Richard either if you're just going to defend her like always. I'm tired of being the responsible one who never gets any consideration. I hung up before she could respond. It felt surprisingly good to finally stand my ground, not just with Natalie, but with my mother as well. 50 years late, perhaps, but better late than never. 3 months later, by that evening, Natalie and Greg had packed their belongings. They didn't say goodbye. In the following weeks, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Natalie and her in-laws were no longer on speaking terms. Apparently, they told her she wasn't welcome in their home after the deception. My mother called several times, leaving voicemails that gradually evolved from demanding I apologize to awkwardly suggesting family dinner to clear the air. I deleted them all. 3 months after the blow-up, my house was peaceful again. The utility bills returned to normal. My work trips became enjoyable rather than necessary escapes. I redecorated the blue bedroom, converting it into a home office where I could work remotely when not traveling. I sit now on my grandmother's porch swing, watching the sunset over the neighborhood she loved. This house isn't just a building, it's my sanctuary, my inheritance, my home. And finally, blissfully, it's mine alone again. But more importantly, I'm finally mine as well, no longer defined solely by my responsibilities to others, but by my own choices and boundaries. At 50, I finally learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. The peace I feel isn't just about having my physical space back. It's about reclaiming my sense of self. It took me half a century, but I finally understand what Grandma Louise tried to teach me all those years ago. Your worth isn't measured by how much you give to others, but by how much you honor yourself.